the ancient Greeks, when they thought of their map, they thought of the shape of the sea, not the shape of the land. The idea of a nation as a shape, which we all carry in our minds, the shapes of our countries, the way that we carry the image of our flags, is something very new and something that the ancient Greeks would not have recognized.
The sea has been something that many people, and through mythology, through stories and through experience, seems to just wash everything away. It makes it possible to kind of cleanse and forget everything through the sea. And this has been fundamentally changing in recent years.
If I'm in the water and you're in the water, we get joined because the water dissolves parts of us. And so, for instance, you might be breathing and your breath becomes a bubble and it comes by me. I could swallow your bubble. So part of you comes to me.
I think the sea changes our ideas about borders. Firstly, because borders can't so easily be fixed in the sea, because the sea is always moving. It doesn't have straight lines. It's not really susceptible to the kinds of straight line imaginaries that I think borders like to draw all over the world.
Seafront is an excellent place to open a conversation about what the commons are, because it's only when we get to the details that a lot of issues of inclusion or exclusion, private or public property, that can start to be debated. Because the sea is such an amazing natural resource, everybody wants to be part of it, everybody wants to access it.
Many of the legal forms that today dominate our world were born actually at sea. But also many resistances were born at sea. Internationalism was born at sea. An international labor force was also born at sea. You know, the merchant ship would bring together many different nationalities, many different people, laborers and workers from many different nations. And that was the first laboratory of international labor consciousness.
If we look at the world from the sea, rather than firm land, the fact that movement is the rule, not a dangerous anomaly or exception, becomes evident. The sea is constant movement. The sea is unbounded. The sea is openness.
You know, the very violence that is exercised against migrants at sea, it's often not a form of like direct violence, right? People are not usually shot at or you know, like it's no physical violence directly, but it's more that, you know, the border regime creates the conditions in which, you know, people are bound to die.
When we fragment the landscape, when we fragment the sea, we're also fragmenting and transforming entire communities' social practices that had been developing for decades and that we're currently suddenly putting a rupture on their organic development.
In many ways, colonial patterns are being repeated. So in order to even stake a claim here, countries had to use extremely expensive technology to be able to actually map and locate every single geopoint, which they were then using to submit to kind of draw out a closed area of space. And a lot of countries in the global south don't have those types of resources.
It seems there are repetitions, there are cycles, you know, just as the tide goes out and comes in, there are cycles with how people relate to the sea. And there have been times when there's been repeated overfishing and we've nearly killed all the fish, and then people stop fishing and then the fish come back and then the same cycle starts again.
When you're at sea, you need help. There's no way that you can be alone at sea. And this is a very fundamental ontological condition that perhaps can help us better understand our general human condition as human beings.
The sea creates a situation where, or at least it has done in history, where it seems to be the foreign, the most dangerous thing, and that humans have to bond together against the sea.
Till the 1970s or 1980s, at least in Western countries, we've been preoccupied with family and genealogy and generation. And during the last decades, also part of all this trend of reproduction technologies, we are reimagining and rethinking our relations as more fluid, as more floating, as more ambivalent.
The biggest thing that at the moment interests me that has changed is the kinds of technologies that are in place which allow us to understand what is going on in the sea, to see it in a very different way.
The Atlas of the Sea is both a political and cartographic inquiry about a new set of borders that have been claimed on the seafloor. These have been facilitated through the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And so the project really attempts to visualize for the first time these already contested spaces.
I think one of the most important things in the battle to reclaim the sea and to have free access to the sea is to build coalitions. And that's why in Lebanon, for example, we made the Lebanese Seafront Coalition, but such coalitions should also go on a regional and a global scale.
Finally, there's been an extraordinary multiplication of non-governmental rescue vessels who have taken to the sea to make up for the lethal absence and the lethal retreat of state means of rescue.
You know, we often imagine the sea as this kind of liquid and empty kind of expanse, right? And I think our work also shows that in fact there are rather than be a lawless space, it's a space where you have a proliferation of different legal regimes and jurisdictional zones, right? And it's often the overlap and the conflicts between these different jurisdictions that is what allows states to refrain from, saving migrants.
One of the things that I'm interested in is, which actually was to some extent inspired by looking at the ships and the boats that were coming and going on the sea because of the refugee crisis, was not only the people coming from the east, but the people coming from the west to offer something or to escape something which I think we don't understand, but which I think is worth observing.
My long-term vision is that we have to move away from international borders, from having borders at all, and we need to be able to move to free movement of people, and actually also away from the concept of citizenship itself.
Ideally, floats would inspire students to think about the sea, to do research about the sea, would inspire academics and researchers, but also thinkers and citizens to introduce the sea closer to the way they understand the world.
To create the sea as a utopia means to work with people and create political communities that can make the sea as that kind of a space.